especially with the help of the explanatory lectures, but he may still miss the meaning of the scheme as a vital whole. It is absurd to think that a vast organization like Masonry was ordained merely to teach to grown-up men of the world the symbolical meaning of a few simple builder's tools, or to impress upon us such Masonry elementary virtues as temperance and justice. The children in every village school are taught such things, or to enforce such simple principles of morals as brotherly love, which every church and every religion teaches, or as relief, which is practiced quite as much by non-Masons as by us, or of truth, which every infant learns upon its mother's knee. There is surely, too, no need for us to join a secret society to be taught that the volume of the sacred law is a fountain of truth and instruction, or to go through the great and elaborate ceremony of the third degree merely to learn that we have each to die. The craft whose work we are taught to honor with the name of a science, a royal art, has surely some larger end in view than merely inculcating the practice of social virtues common to all the world, and by no means the monopoly of Freemasons. Surely, then, it behooves us to acquaint ourselves with what that larger end consists, to inquire why the fulfillment of that purpose is worthy to be called a science, and to ascertain what are those mysteries to which our doctrine promises we may ultimately attain if we apply ourselves assiduously enough to understanding what Masonry is capable of teaching us. Realizing, then, what Masonry cannot be deemed to be, let us ask what it is. But before answering that question, let me put you in possession of certain facts that will enable you the better to appreciate the answer when I formulate it. In all periods of the world's history, and in every part of the globe, secret orders and societies have existed outside the deeper limits of the official churches for the purpose of teaching what are called the mysteries, for imparting to suitable and prepared minds certain truths of human life, certain instructions about divine things, about the things that belong to our peace, about human nature and human destiny, which it was undesirable to publish to the multitude who would but profane those teachings and apply the esoteric knowledge that was communicated to perverse and perhaps to disastrous ends. These mysteries were formerly taught, we are told, on the highest hills and in the lowest valleys, which is merely a figure of speech for saying, first, that they have been taught in circumstances of the greatest seclusion and secrecy, and secondly, that they have been taught in both advanced and simple forms according to the understanding of their disciples. It is, of course, common knowledge that great secret systems of the mysteries, referred to in our lectures as noble orders of architecture, that is, of soul building, existed in the East, in Chaldea, Assyria, Egypt, Greece, Italy, amongst the Hebrews, amongst Mohammedans and amongst Christians. Even among uncivilized African races they are to be found. All the great teachers of humanity, Socrates, Plato, Pythagoras, Moses, Aristotle, Virgil, the author of the Homeric poems, and the great Greek tragedians, along with St. John, St. Paul and innumerable other great names were initiates of the sacred mysteries. The form of the teaching communicated has varied considerably from age to age. It has been expressed under different veils, but since the ultimate truth the mysteries aim at teaching is always one and the same, there has always been taught, and can only be taught, one and the same doctrine. What that doctrine was, and still is, we will consider presently so far as we are able to speak of it, and so far as Masonry gives expression to it. For the moment let me merely say that behind all the official religious systems of the world, and behind all the great moral movements and developments in the history of humanity, have stood what St. Paul called the keepers or stewards of the mysteries. From that source Christianity itself came into the world. From them originated the great school of Kabbalism, that marvelous system of secret, oral tradition of the Hebrews, a strong element of which has been introduced into our Masonic system. From them, too, also issued many fraternities and orders, such, for instance, as the great orders of chivalry and of the Rosicrucians, and the school of spiritual alchemy. Lastly, from them too also issued, in the 17th century, modern speculative Freemasonry. To trace the genesis of the movement, which came into activity some 250 years ago, our rituals and ceremonies having been compiled round about the year 1700, is beyond the purpose of my present remarks. It may merely be stated that the movement itself incorporated the slender ritual and the elementary symbolism that, for centuries previously, had been employed in connection with the medieval building guilds, but it gave to them a far fuller meaning and a far wider scope. It has always been the custom for trade guilds, and even for modern friendly societies, to spiritualize their trades, and to make the tools of their trade point some simple moral. No trade, perhaps, lends itself more readily to such treatment than the builder's trade, but wherever a great industry has flourished, there you will find traces of that industry becoming allegorized, and of the allegory being employed for the simple moral instruction of those who were operative members of the industry. I am acquainted, for instance, with an Egyptian ceremonial system, some 5,000 years old, which taught precisely the same things as Masonry does, but in the terms of shipbuilding instead of in the terms of architecture. But the terms of architecture were employed by those who originated modern Masonry because they were ready to hand, because they were in use among certain trade guilds then in existence, and lastly, because they are extremely effective and significant from the symbolic point of view. All that I wish to emphasize at this stage is that our present system is not one coming from remote antiquity, that there is no direct continuity between us and the Egyptians, or even those ancient Hebrews who built, in the reign of King Solomon, a certain temple at Jerusalem. What is extremely ancient in Freemasonry is the spiritual doctrine concealed within the architectural phraseology, for this doctrine is an elementary form of the doctrine that has been taught in all ages, no matter in what garb it has been expressed. Our own teaching, for instance, recognizes Pythagoras as having undergone numerous initiations in different parts of the world, and as having attained great eminence in the science. Now it is perfectly certain that Pythagoras was not a Mason at all in our present sense of the word, but it is also perfectly certain that Pythagoras was a very highly advanced master in the knowledge of the secret schools of the mysteries, of whose doctrine some small portion is enshrined for us in our Masonic system. What then was the purpose the framers of our Masonic system had in view when they compiled it? To this question you will find no satisfying answer in ordinary Masonic books. Indeed, there is nothing more dreary and dismal than Masonic literature and Masonic histories, which are usually devoted to considering merely unessential matters relating to the external development of the craft and to its antiquarian aspect. They fail entirely to deal with its vital meaning and essence, a failure that, in some cases, may be intentional, but that more often seems due to lack of knowledge and perception, for the true, inner history of Masonry has never yet been given forth even to the craft itself. There are members of the craft to whom it is familiar, and who in due time may feel justified in gradually making public at any rate some portion of what is known in interior circles. But ere that time comes, and that the craft itself may the better appreciate what can be told, it is desirable, nay even necessary, that its own members should make some effort to realize the meaning of their own institution, and should display symptoms of earnest desire to treat it less as a system of archaic and perfunctory rites, and more as a vital reality capable of entering into and dominating their lives, less as a merely pleasant social order, and more as a sacred and serious method of initiation into the profoundest truths of life. It is written that to him that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath, and it remains with the craft itself to determine by its own action whether it shall enter into its full heritage, or whether, by failing to realize and to safeguard the value of what it possesses, by suffering its own mysteries to be vulgarized and profaned, its organization will degenerate and pass into disrepute and deserved oblivion, as has been the fate of many secret orders in the past. There are signs, however, of a well-nigh universal increase of interest, of a genuine desire for knowledge of the spiritual content of our Masonic system, and I am glad to be able to offer to my brethren some light and imperfect outline of what I conceive to be the true purpose of our work, which may tend to deepen their interest in the work of the order they belong to, and, what is of more moment still, help to make Masonry for them a vital factor, and a living, serious reality, rather than a mere pleasurable appendage to social life. To state things briefly, Masonry offers us, in dramatic form and by means of dramatic ceremonial, a philosophy of the spiritual life of man and a diagram of the process of regeneration. We shall see presently that philosophy is not only consistent with the doctrine of every religious system taught outside the ranks of the order, but that it explains, elucidates and more sharply defines the fundamental doctrines common to every religious system in the world, whether past or present, whether Christian or non-Christian. The religions of the world, though all aiming at teaching truth, express that truth in different ways, and we are more prone to emphasize the differences than to look for the correspondences in what they teach. In some Masonic lodges the candidate makes his first entrance of the lodge room amid the clash of swords and the sounds of strife, to intimate to him that he is leaving the confusion and jarring of the religious sects of the exterior world, and is passing into a temple wherein the brethren dwell together in unity of thought in regard to the basal truths of life, truths which can permit of no difference or schism. Allied with no external religious system itself, Masonry is yet a synthesis, a concordat, for men of every race, of every creed, of every sect, and its foundation principles being common to them all, admit of no variation. As it was in the beginning, so it is now and ever shall be, into the ages of ages. Hence it is that every master of a lodge is called upon to swear that no innovation in the body of Masonry, that is, in its substantial doctrine, is possible, since it already contains a minimum, and yet a sufficiency, of truth which none may add to nor alter, and from which none may take away, and since the order accords perfect liberty of opinion to all men, the truths it has to offer are entirely free to us according to our capacity to assimilate them, whilst those to whom they do not appeal, those who think they can find a more sufficing philosophy elsewhere, are equally at liberty to be free from them, and men of honor will find it their duty to withdraw from the order rather than suffer the harmony of thought that should characterize the craft to be disturbed by their presence. The admission of every Mason into the order is, we are taught, an emblematical representation of the entrance of all men upon this mortal existence. Let us reflect a little upon these pregnant words. To those deep persistent questionings which present themselves to every thinking mind, what am I? Whence come I? Whither go I? Masonry offers emphatic and luminous answers. Each of us, it tells us, has come from that mystical East, the eternal source of all light and life, and our life here is described as being spent in the West, that is, in a world which is the antipodes of our original home, and under conditions of existence as far removed from those we came from and to which we are returning, as is West from East in our ordinary computation of space. Hence every candidate upon admission finds himself, in a state of darkness, in the West of the lodge. Thereby he is repeating symbolically the incident of his actual birth into this world, which he entered as a blind and helpless bawbee, and through which in his early years, not knowing whither he was going, after many stumbling and irregular steps, after many deviations from the true path and after many tribulations and adversities incident to human life, he may at length ascend, purified and chastened by experience, to larger life in the eternal East. Hence in the EA degree, we ask, as a Mason, whence come you? And the answer, coming from and meaning apprentice, that is, from the natural man of undeveloped aim of knowledge, is from the West, since he supposes that his life has originated in this world. But, in the advanced degree of the answer is that he comes from the East, for by this time the Mason is supposed to have so enlarged his knowledge as to realize that the primal source of life is not in the West, not in this world, that existence upon this planet is but a transitory sojourn, spent in search of the genuine secrets, the ultimate realities, of life, and that as the spirit of man must return to O God who gave it, so he is now returning from this temporary world of substituted secrets to that East from which he originally came. As the admission of every candidate into a lodge presupposes his prior existence in the world without the lodge, so our doctrine presupposes that every soul born into this world has lived in, and has come hither from, an anterior state of life.